On the outside, Eliana Rosanna was the Duke's perfect daughter. Polished, graceful, obedient. She was everything a nobleman could ask for. But behind the elegance, in reality, she was just a doll. Controlled, a pawn to move across the political board. Sobbing in her room, her father looked at her displeased. As she fell on her knees, she would be marrying the 7th prince of Jacador. But she was scared. Tears poured from her eyes. She begged, voice trembling. She didn't want to die, not at the hands of the imperial family. "You fool," Duke Rosanna yelled, silencing her. He had already planned her wedding, with or without her approval. Still sobbing, she begged, pleading she didn't want to be killed by the emperor. She had already heard rumors of what her future could be if she wed him. Reassuring, he said she had nothing to fear, that her husband wouldn't take another wife, and she would not be harmed. Then, as if that explained everything, he reminded her of the life he gave her. This was what she owed him, for the life he gave her. And now, it was time for her to repay him back. Accepting her fate, she stopped fighting. The wedding proceeded, heartbroken, scared, and in tears. She set off to the unknown, presented to the 7th prince, Marcel Jacador. He didn't look cruel. In fact, he looked at her like she was something fragile. "Your tears are like precious jewels," he said, proclaiming he had fallen for her the moment he laid eyes on her. Faced with her soon-to-be husband, her fear faded away. The wedding passed, and Eliano's feelings grew for her husband. She stayed by his side. She supported him as he stepped onto the battlefield of politics, reaching for the imperial throne. He promised her everything: the world, riches, power. But Eliano only ever wanted one thing: his love. She stood by him, she prayed for him, supported him, helping by funding his political war, gave him her unwavering loyalty. And eventually, Marcel Jacador became emperor. Her efforts finally paid off. He finally seized the throne. He was to make her empress. But things didn't go the way she had dreamed. Officials began whispering. Eliano was from an enemy nation. They claimed her blood was tainted and that she wasn't worthy of being empress. Then one day, Marcel turned to her and asked a simple question. "Do you want to be empress?" She answered honestly, "Yes." But he looked surprised. "Why?" he asked. That was when she broke. How could she be his mistress and not the empress? Bursting into tears, she asked if he still loved her. Didn't he care? He reassured her. He only loved her. So Eliano became empress, just as she wished. But little does she know what was coming. After she became empress, the burdens only grew heavier. Duties piled up, pressure mounted. And Marcel, he started to change. The promise of fidelity started to fall apart as he took another wife, and Eliano had no choice but to accept so. First, it was one woman, then another, then more. He began bringing concubines into the palace, again and again, without hesitation or guilt, without care for Eliano. He stopped visiting her chambers, stopped speaking to her, and love grew distant. Arguments broke out between them. He told her she had changed, that she disappointed him, that she wasn't who he thought she was. He was cold and distant. Her friends whispered, "Bear him a child. It's the only way to secure your future." She refused, too proud, too heartbroken. She was an empress, not some mistress. But in the end, she agreed, for the sake of her survival. When she approached him, vulnerable, sincere, he mocked her. "So, you finally need me?" He said she wanted his child out of desperation, but couldn't take the embarrassment. She shouted through her tears that she would rather die childless than carry his child. In his rage, he struck her. "You should still love me," yelled Twisted.
Staring at the man she once loved, Eliano couldn't believe her eyes. As she wept bitterly, he touched her face, kissed her, and whispered the same twisted line. "Your tears still look like jewels." And then he took her by force. Then came the Northern Grand Duke, Flint Howard. He promised to protect her, promised her freedom, a chance to start over. Sent by her twin brother to bring her home. But she didn't trust him. She threw a teacup at him in fury, demanding how he dared to mock her. Suspicious of his motive, the Duke expressed his pity for the Empress. Still trying to persuade her, promising to wait 3 days for her. After he leaves, her lady-in-waiting begs her to choose the right path. But Eliano refused to be under her brother's mercy. The same brother who once made promises and abandoned her when she needed him most. Eliano only saw betrayal. Where was her brother when she needed him most? He didn't care. Her family never cared about her, and she couldn't trust them after what she went through. 3 days passed. She never showed up. Instead, she sent him a letter, thanking him for his sincerity, and asking him to take back his own throne. And just as she thought she had lost everything, Eliano became pregnant. Hope bloomed. But it didn't last. She lost the child. She mourned. She cried day and night. She remembered the emperor's cruel words and wondered if her pain would ever end. Then came another blow. Rumors spread through the palace that she was illegitimate. The officials demanded she be stripped of her title, but Eliano refused to let go. She had nothing else left but her honor as empress. Then news came. Her entire family was dead, slaughtered by Flint. She was all alone, and with nothing left to fight for, Eliano grew weaker by the day. Sick, pale, quiet. She simply waited for death, until Marcel returned. He acted just like before, like he still loved her. He brought her tea, sat beside her, smiled, as if nothing had ever happened. And just as she let her guard down, she collapsed. The tea had been poisoned. As the pain tore through her body, Marcel just watched. "You'll die as an honorable empress," he says, as she gasps for air. "If only you had given me a child, things might have been different. I would have made your son my successor." He wishes her one last goodbye as her life fades away. Darkness swallowed her whole. Eliano wondered, where had things started going wrong? Should she have accepted Flint's offer? Or was it the moment she married and became empress? And then, she opened her eyes. Somewhere familiar. She was born again, given a second chance at life. Back to the same family that raised her with rules instead of love. Once more, she became Eliano Rosanna. But this time, she was different. Eliano lived a life of luxury. Everything a noblewoman could ever dream of. Every noblewoman envied her. She had wealth, beauty, and her family loved her dearly. But behind the elegance, she was abused. Raised in the image of an old-fashioned noble lady, she was closely watched, treated like a porcelain doll. Once, during a lesson, she made a small mistake. She answered a tutor's question wrong, and for that, she was ruthlessly beaten by her father. He controlled her, manipulated her, and once she didn't listen, he disciplined her. "It was all for your good," he said. But in her new life, she promised he wouldn't do the same. At a ball, she appeared with her father, dressed in splendor, beautiful, as the rumors say, eyes drawn to her like moths to flame. Nobles whispered praise. She was stunning, but envy always lingered. Some called her a crybaby. At the ball, nobles gossiped behind their fans. Some noblemen mocked. She scolded a maid at last week's banquet. To them, she seemed soft, weak. But Eliano wasn't the same girl anymore. At a tea party, a noblewoman tried to insult her. Eliano, composed and sharp, had the woman removed. Just quiet power. Standing in the corner of the room, drink in hand, she reflected on how foolish she had once been. Trusting the wrong people, hoping for love. That's when Liliana approached her. A blonde-haired girl, her childhood friend, the one who used to stand beside her no matter what. They exchanged a few words, but Liliana couldn't help herself. "Did you really have that noblewoman kicked out?" Eliano responded coolly, defending herself with wit. But Liliana wasn't fooled. She asked again, shocked by Eliano's confidence. She was different from the girl she knew. Then, Eliano confronted her. She brought up the words Liliana had said behind her back. Liliana's eyes widened. This wasn't the girl she once knew. Liliana denied the rumors, calling them a misunderstanding meant to drive a wedge between them. Eliano let her speak, but she had heard enough. The bond was broken, and she ended their friendship right then and there, with one final, quiet vow to take back control of her life. Tired of the party, then Eliano excused herself and made her way toward one of the guest rooms, hoping to find a moment of peace. But instead of silence, she ran into two figures, the Crown Prince and the Northern Grand Duke. She bowed respectfully, greeting the prince first, who simply stared, captivated, lost in her beauty. He didn't even speak, his gaze frozen on her face, until the Grand Duke cleared his throat to bring him back to reality. Suggesting that they should give the lady her space, the Grand Duke made a motion to leave. But before he could go, Eliano stepped back and excused herself instead. As she walked away, the Crown Prince hurried after her, but lost her, and so did the Grand Duke. While walking away, Eliano found herself remembering a moment from her past life. The Crown Prince had once been the Emperor's favorite, until his disappearance triggered a brutal war across the empire. A single missing prince and an entire nation bled. A voice pulled her out of her thoughts. It was the Grand Duke. He approached her quietly, holding out an accessory she had dropped. But Eliano refused to take it. It was broken. Later, the Grand Duke told the Crown Prince what had happened. But the prince didn't take it well. He scolded Flint for believing a trick. He explained that it was common for noble women to accidentally drop their belongings to attract the attention of a man they liked. The Emperor had once suggested a marriage between Eliano and the Crown Prince, but the proposal was rejected. The prince hadn't forgiven it, and as he recalled Eliano's calm refusal to accept the broken accessory, he warned Flint not to return it. In silence, Flint agreed. Back at the ballroom, Eliano's father ordered her to return home. She obeyed, and a carriage was prepared for her departure. As she stepped toward the carriage, a guard appeared, one of her supposed escorts, a spy planted by her father. He asked her probing questions, trying to gain information that wasn't his business. Eliano responded coldly, "I don't owe you any answers." The carriage door closed, but to her disbelief, the guard climbed inside and sat opposite her. Shocked, she commanded him to leave, but he insisted that it was his duty to protect her. Still, Eliano would not tolerate disrespect. She stared coldly, "Then protect me from outside." She ordered him outside. If he truly wished to protect her, he would do so from the outside. As the carriage rolled through the night, Eliano's thoughts sharpened. She had to avoid marrying the 7th Prince of Jacador at all costs. That path would only lead her back to the same horrific fate. But first, she had to free herself from the constant surveillance of her father's spies, especially the first and closest one, her nanny. She remembered vividly the way the Northern Duke had tried to help her in her previous life, and how she had turned him away. This time, she wasn't going to end up how she did in her past life. In her room, her maid was brushing her hair harshly, tugging at her scalp without care. Eliano asked her to stop. The maid ignored her. Without hesitation, Eliano slapped the comb away and dismissed her immediately. But just as the maid was about to be removed, then came the nanny, smiling but full of venom. She told the maid to apologize, and claimed Eliano forgave her. Eliano's eyes narrowed in rage. Her voice turned sharp. "Why am I not being listened to? Who is the master?" she snapped, raging. The nanny smiled coldly and replied, "The Duke Rosanna." That was the final straw. Eliano commanded another maid to summon the head butler. But at just one deathly look from the nanny, the maid froze, refusing to move.
Fine.
Eliano stood up and stormed off herself, but was stopped by another servant. If she wouldn't be heard, she would create a scene that forced them to listen. Moments later, in front of the staff and senior servants, she made her stance clear. With the head butler and the head maid, she dismissed every disobedient maid, named their faults without flinching, and when the nanny tried to intervene, the staff stood with Eliano. Disobedient servants must be removed. This time, she won. The nanny was placed on probation for her defiance, and new maids would be brought in by the head maid. Eliano returned to her chamber with a sense of satisfaction. The first wall was down, but just as she started to think, there was a visitor, her sister, Isabella. Eliano serves Isabella tea, and she praises her elegance. Eliano says they're no different, but Isabella mentions how the Duke isn't strict with her like he is with Eliano. She announces her debut in society, then brings up the news about her nanny, Pamela's probation. And with a smile, she makes an offer to help get rid of Pamela. Eliano asks how she plans to help, but Isabella simply smiles, making an offer. Help me take out Marquis Alvich, the man her father wished to wed her to. Confused, Eliano asks if she wishes to kill him. Isabella clarifies, saying Eliano should make Alvich send a proposal to her instead, to seduce him, so he loses interest in Isabella. Eliano declines the offer. Persistent, Isabella begs her, just to have one dance with him. In return, Isabella promised something Eliano wanted even more, help to finally get rid of her nanny for good. So Eliano agrees to the plan. At the ball, she danced with the Marquis, smiling beautifully and deliberately. The room watched in awe. Isabella's plan had succeeded. But after the ball, Eliano was greeted by her nanny. The Duke got her off probation. She expected that, but it was too soon. You should dye your roots again, she said coldly. Your real hair color is starting to show. Eliano had asked before why her hair was different from the rest of her family's, but she always received the same, rehearsed reply, until fate revealed the truth. In the most cruel way imaginable, a letter from her family in Jacador arrived. They demanded the return of the stolen family heirloom, and with that, her secret was exposed. Eliano was not a noble daughter. She was an illegitimate child. She put Eliano to bed and watched her sleep. The next day, she visited Isabella again. It was time to carry out the second part of their deal. Isabella's plan was simple. Accuse the nanny of stealing. Eliano remembered the pair of earrings, the heirloom she was accused of stealing in her past life. Once the nanny holds, she tells Isabella about it. Isabella smiled. Perfect. We'll search her room. But just as she left Isabella's place, a summons came from the Duke, and the nanny escorted her to him, back to the place where she had always been punished as a child. Eliano's hands turned cold. Her knees trembled. The Marquis has sent a marriage proposal. Her father angrily called out, "Did you seduce him?" "No, father," she answered, trying to stay calm. "We only dance." But the Duke's glare deepened. "You dare talk back?" Then the nanny stepped forward. "Discipline her," she whispered, and the Duke commanded, "Hang her." She struggled, but faced by her father and nanny, she had no strength. She fought with everything she had, but in the end, Eliano could not escape the brutal punishment her father had prepared. Isabella rushed to her father's office, insisting to see him, despite the guards trying to stop her. And then, she heard it, a voice trembling, from behind the doors, Eliano's voice, begging, pleading. Her voice, shaky and broken, echoed through the air. She froze. One of the attendants stepped toward her quietly. "The Duke is disciplining her," he said. But this wasn't discipline. It was cruelty. She stood there in stunned silence, rooted to the floor, heart racing, as she heard Iliano's screams. Then, her father's voice echoed through the door. "Are you going to seduce a man again?" And just like that, Isabella understood. This was her fault. All of it. Iliano had suffered. Because of her, she stepped forward, ready to intervene. But a hand stopped her. Her brother. His voice was flat. "Don't interfere." Isabella turned to him, trembling with fury. "How could you let this happen?" she yelled. But he only scoffed.
"She's not one of us," he said.
Iliano wasn't related to the family. "The only thing we all share is the same eye color." The words struck her like lightning, but still, she didn't deserve this. He leaned in closer, his voice concerned. "Don't act rash, Isabella. I don't want father to do the same to you." Then he turned to the guards. "Take her to her room." Down the hall, the screams of maids filled the air. Iliano's nanny stormed through the corridor, dragging a badly beaten Iliano in her arms. "She's mine. Go away," she barked, chasing everyone back. The nanny stared at her, eyes full of disdain, calling her vulgar. "Why did the Marquis ask for your hand?" she asked coldly, whimpering, barely conscious. Iliano stayed silent. "Did you give him your lips?" she asked, pressing on Iliano's injuries. She covered Iliano with a sheet, refused to treat her wounds, and walked away, leaving Iliano in pain. Iliano had envisioned many times how she would run off, escape her father, but the moment she saw him, she froze. Bursting the door open, Isabella came to Iliano's rescue. The nanny yelled, "Who says you can come here?" Glaring, Isabella gave the nanny a befitting reply, a slap to her face, sending her to the floor. "Are you sane?" Isabella snapped, then struck her again. She rushed to Iliano, who was badly wounded. She hadn't been treated. Isabella's gaze fell back on the nanny, sharp and furious. "Why didn't you treat her?"